All right, welcome back to the channel. Shawn Porter, boy. You can rely on Shawn Porter to say something crazy. Well, not too crazy, but to say something that's a little bit off the beaten path. In his podcast, Shawn Porter's podcast, he predicted that Jermall Charlo would lose to Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade because Charlo is too, to phrase what he said more bluntly than what he said, that Charlo is too flat-footed and slow to deal with Demetris Andrade. Shawn Porter, Shawn Porter. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, a lot of tension has been added to the 160-pound division with the demolition of Sergey Derevyanchenko, Derevyanchenko, there it is, Derevyanchenko, at the hands of at the hands of Jermall Charlo. Yeah, at the hands of Jermall Charlo. Now, we don't have a very clear picture of who the best middleweight in the world is, even though I believe that right about now, it's clear that it is Jermall Charlo because of the actions of the other people who are at 160 pounds. Number one, in my opinion, Canelo Alvarez has been ducking Jermall Charlo since 154 pounds. And a lot of the accolades and things that he's achieved in his career might not have come to fruition if he had fought Jermall Charlo or Jermall Charlo while they were at 154 pounds. And that's something that I think people should see, that the style for Jermall Charlo is pretty much, man, set, designed to fight a guy like Canelo Alvarez. And I think he's a top middleweight in the world. Now, there is a question, though, about Demetris Andrade. And I think that it is a very, very fair question about where he stands in the 160-pound division, because much like Jermall Charlo, he is also a good bit avoided in that division. Now, the fact that he's avoided should be even more obvious because he is the WBO champion. He fights on he fights on DAZN along with Jermall Charlo, along with Gennady Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez. And if you recall, there were so many of the people over there at 160 pounds at DAZN that Eddie Hearn, talking about Jermall Charlo, said, look, man, you're just not going to have a career if you don't sign with DAZN and come fight these middleweights over here. But one of the people that did sign over there with DAZN is Demetris Andrade, and he still never got a fight with Gennady Golovkin or Canelo Alvarez. In fact, DAZN didn't even sound like they wanted to try to make the fight. So, in some ways, he is in the same situation as Jermall Charlo is, where the guys that get the most press in that division, that whether it be the Gennady Golovkin or Canelo Alvarez, right? Those guys just somehow, Jermall Charlo and Demetris Andrade don't get included in the conversation. But now that Jermall Charlo has broken out with his win over Sergey Derevyanchenko on pay-per-view, Shawn Porter got to go try to tie Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade to Jermall Charlo, which I think, because obviously that's his partner. You could tell, by the way that he talked to him, that he was like, no, that's his guy. And I'm sure he has, an affinity for the fighting style on Boo Boo Andrade, especially when Boo Boo Andrade was in the amateurs and was one of the top guys in the American amateur system. And, if you look at the matchup, man, that's a good fight between Demetris Andrade and Jermall. But what does Shawn Porter say about it, right? He says that the Charlo brothers have faced problems with fighters that have good footwork, that make them move, make them use their feet. And my thought of that is, where did he see this? Exactly. Like, where did you see this? Where is this time where Jermall Charlo or Jermall Charlo looked baffled because somebody was using because somebody was using footwork. Now, maybe he's talking about Jermall Charlo when he fought Tony Harrison, but I don't see it. I'm sorry, I just don't see it with I don't see it with Jermall Charlo. I don't see that with Jermall Charlo. Now, how the fight could turn out, I couldn't tell you. The southpaw aspect of Demetrius Andrade, I think, could cause Jermall a problem. But then again, Jermall fought pretty well against Matt Korobov, who was a southpaw as well. But the actual breakdown of the fight and who I think will win, we can do in another video. But I do think that it is enough to say that Shawn Porter is just, I don't know if Shawn Porter really means what he says in this, or whether or not, he's trying to give Demetrius Andrade some desperately needed press, kind of like I'm doing in this video by talking about Demetrius Andrade, because other than that, ain't nobody talking about Demetrius Andrade. Now, I wouldn't mind seeing a Jermall Charlo Demetrius Andrade fight, because Demetrius Andrade does have the WBO, and that would be a unifying fight. So that is a good fight. That is definitely a good fight for Jermall Charlo. But I think what Jermall is really trying to do is try to get a shot at the WBA belt, which is, Canelo Alvarez. And I do not see that the PBC or Jermall Charlo are going to pump the brakes on trying to go after Canelo Alvarez to do some joint fight with DAZN. So I just don't think that that's going to happen. Now, there's some other reasons why I don't think that Jermall Charlo would be in too much of a big rush to fight Demetrius Andrade. And you have to go back to this. I know people who are big Demetrius Andrade fans don't like to talk about this, but the Charlo brothers and Demetrius Andrade have history. And the history is of Demetrius Andrade ducking the Charlos. That's the only, in the specific situation was that Jermall Charlo was supposed to fight Demetrius Andrade at 154 pounds. I do believe for his IBF. I think that he held the IBF belt at the time. And Showtime, if that's the wrong belt, forgive me, but I'm sure that it was a belt. Demetrius Andrade held a belt at 154 pounds. The Showtime Sports offered Demetrius Andrade a multi-fight deal, and part of that deal was to defend his title against Jermall Charlo. So those guys they announced the fight, and then Demetrius Andrade backed out of it because he was offered some money by Rock Nation for some fight that never materialized, and that left Jermall Charlo, hanging out in the wind and not having an opportunity to fight for his first championship fight. So truly, the question about whether or not the Jermall Charlos, either Jermall or Jermall, would have had problem with the movement of Demetrius Andrade could have been answered many years ago, but Demetrius Andrade decided not to do it. And that's just one of the multiple bad decisions that Demetrius, or mind-boggling decisions, I guess is how I think a better way to say it, that you get out of Demetrius Andrade. Like the fact that Demetrius Andrade signed with DAZN, right? Like, he had gotten out of the contract. I think he was who his promoter was, but he had gotten out of his previous promotional contract. He was a free agent, and he had gotten offers from the PBC. He had gotten offers from, I suppose, Top Rank, but I know obviously he got offers from DAZN. He chose to fight with DAZN because he thought that meant he was going to be able to get the fights with Billy Joe Saunders. By the way, Billy Joe Saunders was the WBO champion there, and they were set up to fight Demetrius Andrade and Billy Joe Saunders. Then Billy Joe Saunders tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, and boom, there goes Demetrius Andrade's only halfway decent fight that's been offered to him over there on DAZN. He hasn't come anywhere near Gennady Golovkin, and in fact, after Canelo Alvarez beat Gennady Golovkin and won, what did he do? No, I'm sorry, I think he beat Daniel Jacobs. Yep, that's what it is. He beat Daniel Jacobs to get the IBF belt. He had all three. He had the WBC, the WBA, and the IBF. And instead of fighting Demetrius Andrade, which would have been undisputed, he decided to go up and fight Rocky Fielding. But that was also at the behest of DAZN, because after the fight with Canelo Alvarez, the fight with, I think that was Selecki and Demetrius Andrade. After that fight was over, Eddie Hearn announced that the Zone didn't want the fight between Canelo and Demetrius Andrade. So, it's just a rough situation for Demetrius Andrade, and I like that Shawn Porter is trying to help him piggyback on Jermall Charlo's big moment, but don't count on that fight happening anytime soon. And even if it did, I still think Jermall Charlo beats Demetrius Andrade. Might even be by knockout. But you let me know what you think in the comment section. With that, I'm out. Peace.